to the Border Chronicle weekly roundup. This is the live video portion of our weekly roundup, which I'll be posting right after this video, where we talk about the news that we've published this week in the Border Chronicle and other headlines across the border that are, of note. And gosh, just a lot of, I hate to say it, but a lot of bad news this week on the border, but we'll get into that later. First, we want to talk about like some more positive stuff, which was like this really wonderful Q&A that you did this week, Caroline. And I'm here, of course, with Caroline Tracy, who is our arts and culture and environmental reporter and editor. We keep giving you more hats to wear. Yeah, but you did this really wonderful Q&A with Raquel Gutierrez, who lives here in Tucson, and she's a poet and author, and she has a new poetry book that came out this week, right, called Southwest Reconstruction. And
Yes.
I'm wondering what drew you to Raquel's work.
Yes. I had the opportunity to do a Q&A with Raquel, who is a really amazing writer, poet, performer, educator who lives here in Tucson, but works across the Southwest and has done a lot of really interesting, deep thinking about the region. I have their two books here, Brown Neon Essays and Southwest Reconstruction, the new poetry book that we spoke about in our Q&A. And I think that they are both a really interesting perspective on everything from uh, music and photography to the history of colonialization in the Southwest, and that sort of really interdisciplinary but clear way that everything is connected really comes through in the work.
Yeah, and she's originally from LA. I was born in LA. So she talks about freeways and how freeways have really impacted her work. And that spoke to me as a child of freeways as also, and I grew up in Southern California, land of freeways. So I thought that was very interesting how a lot of her work is inspired along the I-10 interstate. That's interesting.
Yeah, in the interview, Raquel said something like, "I'm still working through the way that the freeway is imprinted on me." And I've also um, seen Raquel speak about how the freeway is something that recurs in Chicano, Chicana, Chicanx photography and other art forms too. And I think that's a really interesting lens on Southwestern art. And so it's definitely present in the book, and I think it's something that is really interesting to explore.
Yeah, and we have, I should say, at the Border Chronicle, we have a new bookshop where people can buy these books, right? That we're doing Q&As with the authors, reviews. So we now have a link at the bottom of the Q&A with Raquel where you can go and buy her books, Brown Neon and Southwest Reconstruction.
Yeah,
So
so bookshop.org is a great alternative to Amazon for anyone who wants to divest from Jeff Bezos's world domination
yes.
plans. Bookshop.org has an affiliate program where we now have a page where we can link to all the different books that we've recommended in the Border Chronicle over the last 5 years or more now. And the Border Chronicle receives a small commission from those sales. So if anyone feels moved to read the work that we have written about, that's a great way to sort of kill two birds with one stone: support the writers and support the Border Chronicle.
Yeah, we have a list of Border Chronicle book recommends, which is great for, leading up to Christmas for gifts. I saw Jen Budd is on this live video. Hello, Jen. So Jen's book is on there in our list of recommends. And of course, we've done some really great Q&As and interviews and podcasts with Jen in the past about her, her former life as a Border Patrol agent and now very fierce critic of the agency. So yeah, check. I don't know why we didn't set up this bookshop before.
Well, we just, I think, I think we've been realizing over the course of this year just how valuable doing the regional arts and culture coverage is. And I think, there are so many really amazing writers and artists and thinkers in this region that don't necessarily get national coverage all the time. And so I think that it's really cool that we get to be this regional outlet highlighting that work, and hopefully readers can help support the artists too.
Yeah, and it fulfills our mission too of pushing back against this crisis narrative, or the border being this barren place that is filled with armed men and invaders, or whatever the horrible like MAGA rhetoric is about the border. It's a very rich place. It's full of artists. It's full of thinkers and writers, uh and just has a diversity of culture and all kinds of like very, very talented people. So it's really wonderful that we get to highlight that here at the Border Chronicle. I want to segue into Thursday. So Todd translated and edited a photo essay by a photographer from Chihuahua named Eduardo Talamantes. And he has been documenting the Rio Conchos Basin and the drought, this just very, very extreme drought. And of course, Todd has been working on a book about the same subject now. And he's trying to get that done like this month. So he's been like really down, um, trying to finish his book. But so Eduardo, I mean, it's pretty disturbing, right? The photos that Eduardo has been documenting in the basin, and I know you're pretty well versed in water issues. I mean, how did it strike you, Caroline, seeing um, Eduardo's work?
I guess the one of the main impressions that I had was that it's a really similar dynamic to what we see in the American Southwest too, right? Like that, it's obviously the same drought, but in both regions, on both sides of the border, we also have this dynamic of both kind of overuse or over appropriation of the water resources, which makes it really hard to deal with drought when drought happens. So if in a very wet year, 100% of the water is allocated to different farmers, then in a year where you only have uh, 70% or 30% of the water resources available, there just isn't enough water to go around for all the people that have spoken for it. And so that dynamic is obviously even more complicated in the Rio Conchos because the Rio Conchos is really important. And I mean, Todd is writing an entire book about this, so I feel like he should be the one explaining it. But the Rio Grande, of course, makes the border between the US and Mexico. But the Rio Grande is basically at this point in time two separate rivers. So it starts in Colorado, but it dries up in El Paso. And then there's this reach that is um, it's a dried up river, and it only revives when the Rio Conchos comes back into it. And so the Rio Conchos is the source of the water allocation that the U.S. sees as owed to it, and so it's an additionally controversial river.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of the Texas border, right? The river there, the Rio Grande, is supplied by the Rio Conchos, right? And
Exactly. When
then
the Rio Grande revives, it's Rio Conchos River, Rio Conchos water, really.
yeah. And we have, of course, the US-Mexico Water Treaty, which has been very contentious. And there's not enough water. Mexico doesn't have the water to pay for the treaty. So that's going to be very contentious. And then now we're leading into like negotiations, renegotiating NAFTA, which is now USMCAA or something, yeah, USMCA, or however they call it. So, I mean, I just anticipate, especially under this administration, that the water treaty issues are going to get pulled into this renegotiation over trade, and it's just going to be a huge mess, I imagine.
Yeah, I think that the Rio Grande and the Rio Conchos water that feed it have just become this really politicized idea of Mexico taking what belongs to the U.S. In a way that doesn't really have to do with the sort of like hydrological reality.
Yeah, I mean, when you see, especially through Eduardo's photographs in this photo essay that we published on Thursday, there is no water to give. It's simply not there. You see, fishermen who are unable to fish because there's not enough water in the lake. and you see a Rio Conchos, which is actually just dirt. There's not water in the Rio Conchos in parts of it. So yeah, it's incredibly alarming. Um, and along those lines, I'll be posting our weekly roundup just right after this live video with other headlines from across the border, and it's been a pretty depressing week at the border. I mean, we had the blasting of the Coronado there in the San Rafael Valley to build the border wall. You know, the administration is just blasting away at the mountain with dynamite. Um, we're going to have Miles Trapphagen, who is a very long time border wildlife expert, who's going to be doing a piece on that for us in the coming week or two about the blasting. Also, the No More Deaths humanitarian camp was raided by Border Patrol as well, which harkens back to the first Trump administration, right? And Todd did a very long podcast, or very informative podcast with Scott Warren, who was part of that, who actually ended up going to trial for providing humanitarian aid. And so here we go again. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
and on
it's
top of that, I mean, continued criminalization of green card holders and other immigrants that historically hadn't been considered violators of any kind of law that in fact are not.
yeah, I just got off of a podcast this morning with an immigration judge who was just fired, who was hearing asylum cases and was fired by email and with no cause. So that podcast will be coming out soon, where we talk about the immigration system and how it's just being hollowed out. And I think the goal of this administration is just to have everybody in detention camps where they'll just be quickly removed, and there will be no due process, no asylum hearings, because there won't be any judges left, which is seems like the way that we're headed right now. In speaking to this judge that I just interviewed. Um, Anyhow, I want to thank everybody for joining us for this video, just sort of giving a rundown of what we've posted this week in the Border Chronicle, and I'll have more links for you too to other stories. And thanks, Caroline, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. Everybody have a good weekend. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye-bye.